Hi, Colin, Paula, colleagues and friends at the University of Auckland Medical School. I'm so pleased to be with you all today to honour Colin and his manyfold contributions to science. And by saying you all, I obviously mean all of you. Apparently I've been in the US South too long. So let's see if I can share my screen here. So this is a picture of Colin I found online recently. It was an article in NZ Optics outlining his many important contributions to science, both translational and basic. Colin is one of the smartest, most creative and industrious scientists I know. So I thought my next slide would be a picture of Colin skiving off work. So here he is pictured with his collaborator and friend, Nick Severs at Bristol Docks in England in 1988. And as indicated in the on the diary page opposite, the three of us were supposed to be at a scientific conference, but took part of the day off to see the sights on the Bristol waterfront, including the venerable old steamship, the SS Great Britain. And I hope you can all grasp the sartorial majesty that was Nick and Colin as younger men. The ties, the hair, the beards, the yellow sweater. Anyway, at the time, Colin was a Royal Society University Research Fellow and lecturer at University College London. And Nick was a reader, I think, at the nearby National Heart and Lung Institute, which was then on Wimpole Street, near Harley Street in central London. And together they led a collaboration on gap junctional connexins in the heart, and in particular, raising antibodies against heart connexins. And this is where I came in. I'd not long been recruited as a postdoc to their project and was pretty much fresh out of my PhD studies. Actually, I hadn't completed my PhD when this photo was taken. And this is a task that Colin and Nick helped me finish, but that's another story. Suffice to say that they were taking a pretty big risk when they agreed to hire me. This is another photo. This one was shared with me by Nick Severs, and it was taken a year or two later in London. And you can see Nick and Colin again. Me, here I am here, now with my PhD, as well as Nick's postdoc, Terry Newman, and Nick Peters, who is now a prominent cardiologist in the UK. He was doing his MD PhD at the time. And Nick's wonderful technician, Steve Throthery. Fortunately, the photo's in black and white, so the color of our attire, especially the color of any tie or sweater, is now lost to history. Okay, so this is the front page of the paper that I contributed to Colin's bound volume, which was produced from this period. And on it, you can see that Colin is the last and senior author, right here. The journal Cardioscience, in which the paper was reported, is now defunct. So the paper's not going to ring any impact factor bells, but it's of special significance to me because it was my first as a full peer-reviewed publication as first author. And here's an important comment to be made about Colin's numerous scientific publications, many of which were in far more august and long-standing journals. They're replete with students and postdocs taking first author or other important authorship slots. Not only students and postdocs, but also junior faculty and other colleagues who Colin often stood aside for, letting them take corresponding or senior authorship spots. Colin made sure stuff got published, which all of us know is no easy discipline. But in his drive to get published, I believe the key and character-defining attribute to take note of was that he was often generous, and is generous to a fault, in assisting the career development of those he worked alongside. stepping back to let others shine when he could have taken more of the limelight himself. I know this was the case with me, and his guidance and generosity were big factors in my start as an independent scientist. As the New Zealand Optics article that I started with said, Colin is a research gentleman. So looking back at the paper after all these years, I found it a little bit disconcerting to go through it. I kind of saw strands within it in which my fate was sealed at the time. I didn't know it, and it's perhaps in a good way as well. Let's say that. So the paper uses laser scanning confocal microscopy to understand the three-dimensional organization of connexin 43 and intercalated discs in the ventricle of rat hearts. This type of confocal microscopy was pretty new at the time, and Colin had been instrumental in getting one of these newfangled microscopes to University College. The departmental microscope was one of the first commercial installations of a laser scanning confocal microscope in the country, and perhaps even in the world. If memory serves, Colin persuaded the head of department, Professor Burnstock, to purchase one during morning coffee, maybe even spurred on by a BBC TV show that he'd seen the night before. Colin, you can correct the record if I'm wrong about any of this. Also, I should mention that departmental coffee break at 10 a.m. was always a big deal. Nearly everyone within the department came for the fresh coffee, free coffee, and bourbon chocky bickies. Always a big time during the day, especially for hungry postdocs. So as I mentioned, looking back at this paper was a bit of a strange experience for me, let me tell you why. So here's figure 1, and it shows a diagram of the connexin 43 molecule as it's folded in the membrane. And on it you can see short segments marked H, HJ, HQ. These correspond to parts of the connexin 43 sequence that we received as short peptides from Norton Galula, who was Colin's own former postdoctoral mentor in the United States. And we used the peptides that Dr. Galula had generously sent to us to raise antibodies against connexin 43. Now, it wasn't long after that we came to realize that these short mimetic peptides could have functional effects on connexin 43. Ideas that Colin's collaborator, Howard Evans, in discussion with Colin and Anne Warner, began to develop. So, for example, this arrow here, the blue arrow, points to the location of what came to be known as the GAP27 peptide in the second extracellular loop domain of connexin 43. This is one of the first such peptides to be made and used in experimentation. And it's also close to the sequence of peptide 5, which peptide 5 is based. And I'm sure you're all familiar with peptide 5 in Auckland. So in the spirit of this idea, my own lab over the years has focused on peptides based on the carboxyl terminus of connexin 43, which are illustrated here. And some of these peptides have been taken all the way through to late stage clinical trials, in particular by one of my former postdocs in a company he formed for that purpose. Here's another figure from the paper, again, it gave me a little bit of a chill. It shows a confocal image of immunolabeling of connexin 43, probably corresponding to gap junctions. That's what these spots correspond to between the ventricular myocytes. It's a projection of multiple confocal optical sections. So what you're looking at is represents connexin 43 labeling within a volume of muscle that's probably somewhere between 5 to 10 micrometers deep. So on the left of the image, you see a line corresponding to an intercalated disc. This is sort of the traditional representation of the intercalated disc. We see a longitudinally arrayed myocytes, and the disc is often shown as a line between the myocytes. But to the right, you see an intercalated disc face on. And here what's happening is we're looking down the barrel of the microscope, actually more or less onto the surface of the intercalated disc, to give what we refer to as an en-face view of the intercalated disc. So at the time, this perspective that was afforded uniquely by the confocal microscope and its abilities to generate these types of image was novel. And it was one of the very exciting aspects of this new way of doing microscopy. So here is a more recent image, a series of images, and this part of it here is actually part of a figure that we published in a paper in eLife a couple of years ago. And what it shows is an image or images that are basically lineal descendants of the type of image that we just saw in the cardioscience paper. In this case, we're using super resolution microscopy, and what we're doing is we're looking at the relationships between the beta 1 subunit of the voltage gated sodium channel within the intercalated disc and its relationship to connexin 43 and N-cadherin. But the perspective, as you can see here and here, of the en-face disc is fundamentally the same as that shown in the cardioscience paper. So Colin's influence on my work over the years is embodied in data such as this. And I'm so grateful for his guidance and mentorship during my start as a developing scientist, and the risk that he and Nick took on me, and also indebted to him for the positive influence he continues to have on me as I continue on my own path. And of course, alongside every great man, there's an equally great partner in life. Here's a picture that Dr. Ji Zhang was kind enough to share with me that I think perfectly captures the joyous spirit and energy of Paula. So at the time I was doing my postdoc with Colin in London, Paula was running an extremely successful business in London, providing software documentation. She was also my batting partner in the departmental indoor cricket team, and she's a very good cricket player. And I just want to share this with you. So Colin and Paula, I don't know if you remember this beast. This is our team bat, which I've kept through all these years. Our team was called the Rainbow Warriors. So you can see it written right here. And Colin and Paula were both avid members of that team. I once, when we were at bat, hit Paula in the head with a cricket ball, and I feared I'd seriously injured her. And I reminded Paula of this recently, and in her characteristic level-headed style, she played it down, replying that what she remembered most about our indoor cricket career was that we once our partnership ran up a score of 99 not out. We didn't quite make the century, unfortunately, but nonetheless, it is a fun memory. So Colin and Paula are both remarkable and wonderful human beings. I feel very fortunate and grateful to know and have been influenced by them. I will conclude by saying that I aspire to emulate them both. It would be hard to find better people to model oneself on. So thanks for this invitation to share some reminiscences of Colin and my time with him. And I'm wishing you all the best for Colin's Festschrift. I'm sure you're going to have a blast. See you all.